Hey, hi, how are you? My name is Felt, and welcome back to Final Fantasy XIV. Today, we're going to be talking about melee jobs in ShadowBringers. Specifically, patch 5.35. This is post-Potion Front launch, but this is before the monk rework that's supposed to be coming in patch 5.4. Now, in the background is footage of me doing Stone Sky Sea for the current tier of Savage raids. Now, the reason it's not Savage footage is because even though I've done a little bit of Savage raiding, I don't have any clears of it yet. And I felt that this was the best way to have like short little bits for each job. That way I don't have these like massive 45-minute long videos where I'm trying to talk about all the melees at once, like nearly happened with my tank video. So, some apologies if the job that I'm talking about doesn't exactly line up with the footage in the background. I'm going to be trying to match it up as best as possible, but this intro is going to throw off my timing a little bit. So just know that if I'm talking about Dragoon still when Ninja shows up, I'll get to Ninja, I promise. Now, before I even get into anything, I just want to say, can we please just combine some gear sets here? Like, we don't need 3 gear sets for 4 melee jobs, especially since Ninja uses aiming accessories? Yoshi please. Let's start by talking about Dragoon. Now, Dragoon was the very first job that I played in Final Fantasy XIV, so obviously I'm going to be really biased talking about it. It's honestly one of my favorite jobs in the game still, despite the fact that I've not been playing it as much lately because I've been enjoying exploring other jobs. Dragoon just has a solid rotation that it is built in. It is a 5 GCD rotation that you just slowly cycle through. I also like the general simplicity of it. Sure, you get a lot of animation lock with all your jumps, but because of that, the rotation is made so that you will at very most double weave like twice. And it's typically self-buffs, and it's typically things like Mirage Dive, which are a very quick animation allowing you to double weave with other abilities. Now, the GCD rotation itself, the simple flow, feels really good to me. You have a dot that you have to keep up, and if you're doing your rotation correctly, it will always stay on a boss as long as they do not leave. You have a gauge that is very simple to keep up as long as you're doing your rotation properly, once again. And then, if you're doing everything absolutely correct, you can switch into a phase called Life of the Dragon, and you get off some really big damage with abilities like Nostrand and Stardiver. Don't Stardiver into Tank Busters. Don't be me. Be better. I also really like Dragoon because it only has like one self-buff that is literally a button press and very easy to pick back up with Blood of the Dragon. And so it's really easy to just pick yourself back up if you're learning a fight and just jump right back into things. You won't always be hitting your Nostrand and Stardivers though if you're dying, so, you know, avoid that at all costs. Rotations change a bit, but you basically get the gist of your 5 GCD rotation around level 58. And the GCD rotation at that point is basically the same all the way up until 80. Some of the things I like about Dragoon are its generally like okay utility with Battle Litany and Dragon Sight, where you can buff your party's crit rate and then buff someone else's damage. Battle Litany being 3 minutes is pretty rough though. I kind of wish they would take that cooldown and like, I don't know, make it like a 2-minute cooldown in place of a 3. But overall I really like Dragoon and I can highly recommend it to anyone who wants to pick up melee. Now, let's go into the one that is now currently on screen and talk about Ninja. Now, Ninja is like the surprise favorite for me. I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I do, but it kind of makes sense the more I think about it because it has a very set rotation similar to Dragoon, being that every 60 seconds you have this burst window where you just throw everything in the kitchen sink at the boss. Literally, you have a damaging ability off cooldown, use it during this window because it's when you're popping Trick Attack. Now, Trick Attack makes the boss take 5% more damage from all sources. And I do mean all sources. So, Ninja actually has a lot of party utility in the fact that it brings an extra 5% damage every 60 seconds. Trick Attack lasts for 15 seconds, so every 15 out of 60 seconds, the boss is going to be taking 5% more. So while Ninja's personal DPS is a little lower than the rest of the melees here, they still bring a lot to a party. Now, Ninja's Trick Attack is honestly a little tricky. Don't worry, I hate that joke too. Just because there's so many abilities that you have to fit inside of it. You have to fit inside your Tenchi Jin, your Dream Within a Dream, your Assassinate, your Kasatsu. You have to make sure you're hitting your GCDs the entire way through. You have to be making sure that if you used Bunshin, you can get your Bahava Kakras off as often as possible. It's a very tough opener to learn and a very tough burst window to learn, but once it clicks, as long as you are making sure that you are saving your abilities properly for your Trick Attack window, you can bring decent damage to a party. Now, like I said, their actual personal DPS is a little lower, but due to the fact that they're buffing everyone's damage by 5%, they're, like, you always want to have a ninja in your party, IMO. Now, the fact that they use dex-based gear, which feels a little strange compared to the rest of the melees, the fact that their right side gear is shared with ranged physical, it's a little weird to gear them, but if they're your only melee DPS, it's not as big of a deal. Like I said, this all kind of comes down to none of the melee DPS really share armor except for Samurai and Monk. And thankfully, those two armor sets, they're basically identical for BIS for the most part. There'll be differences in skill, speed, and crit that you want to hit, but for the most part, they share. And I didn't even mention, Dragoon has its own armor set separate from everybody else's as well. So if you're dedicating yourself to a melee, make sure that you're really paying attention to which ones that you can share armor and accessories with. Now next, we're going to be talking about Samurai. Samurai is the only DPS on this list that doesn't bring any type of party buffs. But man, oh man, do they not need to bring it. Samurai is all about bringing in just absolutely massive damage. They've consistently been one of the highest performing DPS since pretty sure ShadowBringers launch. They've always been in the top 2 to 3. Honestly, if you're going to pick up a melee and you're not sure if you're going to like melee or not, I highly recommend Samurai. Samurai is a very basic rotation at level 50 that carries on all the way until you reach level 80. It's not the exact same thing all the way through. As your weaves get more intense, you start having to worry about your Kenki gauge management, and then your stacks that you use for Shoha as you get to 80. But overall, it's pretty much the same. It's more of building on itself than introducing new mechanics the way that Ninja and Dragoon did. They have a really, really smooth rotation. They're similar to Ninja in that regard. They have a nice little 60-second cycle that they consistently roll through. There is an asterisk on that, though. So depending on what skill speed tier you're in for Samurai, you will have to do what most people call like a filler window for part of the fight, meaning that you're using anywhere from 2 to 4 GCDs on just throwing out abilities that you're going to then convert into Kenki to spend on those damaging abilities in place of trying to get your stickers up. And by stickers, I mean Sen. There was a very memey Samurai video that released a while ago that called them stickers, and that is always stuck in my head. And so while it is not a perfect 60-second cycle, it might as well be, because on the slow Sam, as people call it, or the Samurai that run at the slowest skill speed of the current BIS, you only really need to add in 2 GCDs of filler in between your actual 60-second rotation, which is a lot easier to manage mentally than trying to manage 3 or 4. So since I'm basically done talking about Samurai, I'm going to fill the rest of the Samurai video portion here by talking about positionals. Now this is something I didn't mention for Dragoon or for Ninja, but they also have positionals. All melee jobs have positionals, meaning that you'd have to stand behind or to the side of the boss in order to get either the maximum potency, the maximum amount of gauge, or just extra abilities out of your standard weapon skills. And while it doesn't sound like a huge deal at first, and it isn't for a couple of jobs like Monk, it is a generally good thing to try and hit every single positional that you can, because it'll either give you the highest amount of potency or the most amount of gauge to spend. And all of those things combined will help push you into a higher damage bracket, basically. Alright, now as the Samurai's finishing up, we gotta move to the most fun, disappointing, depressing, but wonderful job of the bunch, Monk. Honestly, I really, really want to enjoy Monk. Monk is one of those jobs that I really wish I could get into and get behind, because it feels decent, but there's a lot of things holding it back right now. Supposedly, we're getting an update to it in patch 5.4, so take everything I'm saying right now with a big ol' grain of salt. But that's why I wanted to get out of this video now, before patch 5.4, so I can talk about the current state of Monk and how it felt as I leveled it, as opposed to how it's going to feel post buffs and changes. Now, Monk's main mechanic is called Greased Lightning, and it is a buff that you stack on yourself that decreases weapon skill cast time, increases damage, and makes you auto-attack bosses faster. Now, all of these things combined are great, however, it's a pain in the ass. You have 4 stacks of it at level 80, and you need to hit the end ability in your 1-2-3 combo, which, by the way, isn't really that simple. There's 2 variations of it, one that gives buffs, and then a damage over time, and then one that is straight damage. And so, because it only has 16 seconds, you have to constantly be flying through your 1-2-3 combo and trying to make sure that you're always keeping it up. And while, yes, every job's trying to do that, with Monk it feels a little bad, because there's times when you're going to have to walk away from a boss in order to make it so that you're not getting hit by attacks. And sure, you have tools like Six-Sided Star, which doubles your GCD timer in exchange for a higher damaging ability, which freezes your Greased Lightning counter. And you also have stuff like Form Shift, which will refresh your Greased Lightning counter. But it doesn't feel great to have to use those in place of just not having your damage buff drop off, compared to, say, the way that Samurai and Monk have damage buffs that they can keep up by just hitting GCDs. And Samurai gets 40 seconds of time on their buff, meanwhile Ninja gets 70 seconds on their buff, and hitting the end of their combo gives them an extra 30 seconds onto it. So Monk only getting 16 seconds of the buff that you have to refresh fairly frequently feels a little not great. Honestly though, if they fix that problem, or what I consider to be a problem with Greased Lightning, then I bet Monk will feel so good. They also bring a lot to a party, with stuff like Brotherhood and Mantra. Now Brotherhood will buff all physical party members' damage for a duration, and Mantra will actually buff healing for a duration. So they both are pretty powerful abilities that'll help out the rest of your party by quite a bit. And Monk has some solid self-buffs with stuff like Riddle of Fire and Earth's Reply, one of those giving just a solid damage buff, and the other one giving a buff that means that you don't have to hit your positionals. And I've already talked about that. Not having to hit your positionals properly, pretty heckin' nice. Now this was just going to be a short video going over a little bit about each job and how I felt about them. I went through them in order of my favorites. So Dragoon, Ninja, Samurai, Monk in that order, but that might change in 5.4. If you want me to do a more in-depth video on any of these jobs, leave a comment down below and ask me for it. I'll gladly go into them. For now, my name's been Felt. Thanks for watching, thanks for hanging out. If you really liked the video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I hope to see y'all next time. Bye!